Hey folks, welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And it's This Week in History, where Will finds an event that happened this week in the past and then talks to me about it. He has 1 hour to explain it to me.
Yep.
And this week we are discussing
The Siege of Acre.
Siege of Acre.
Which took place actually in 1189 to 1191, but the specific event of it we're talking about today is the 20th of August.
All right.
I wrote it down as the 18th originally, but it's the 20th of August.
Yeah, well, it's this week in history.
But it's this week in history.
We're thinking that way.
That's how we're qualifying this.
All right, so you have 1 hour to explain to me.
I got it.
The Siege of Acre.
I'm ready. All right. So this is all part of the Crusades, which we've talked about a bunch, and there were like 9 of them at least.
Okay.
The first one
is one of the many.
Yes, the first one's the only one that technically achieved the goal of the Crusades, which was to take Jerusalem back, in quotations, because the Christians never owned Jerusalem before it.
Oh.
Ever.
Okay.
It was owned by originally the Jews.
Yep.
And then the Romans owned it, who were not Christian at the time.
I see.
And that's just where Jesus was for part of his career.
Does that
died.
So the Christians claim ownership?
They claim ownership, but so do the Muslims, because Jesus is a prophet in Muslim faith as well. He's considered like a precursor.
That's
prophet.
nice of them.
Yeah, Muslims, Islam technically.
Does Christians do the other way?
No, no, not even
Strange.
remotely close. Islam sees itself as the third step in the same faith of Abrahamic religion. So Abraham is the first prophet of Israel. Okay. That's the Jews. That's the first Abrahamic faith. Yep. And then the Christians are the follow-up, hence Old Testament, New Testament. And then technically Islam sees itself as almost like the Third Testament. Well, that's what the Quran is.
So the Mormons are the fourth then, if we're counting.
They're their own thing. If you read that book, it's its own thing. I'll reserve judgment.
Really, any sequel after the third sequel is not as good.
Really, that's true. Usually the third sequel's not as good either, and many people have argued that point. But other people have argued the first sequel wasn't great either. Because it's like a trade-off between the second and the third of who can kill the most people. And the Jews are just sitting there like, I think you missed the point. Although they killed a lot of people in the Old Testament too. So it seems like the Abrahamic faiths are all about just killing everybody around them, at least for the first couple hundred years of their, maybe 1,000 years of their existence.
Huh. You can't
so
blame,
I think
blame
Islam's
TV for
just catching up.
Oh, okay.
They're like, oh no, we're like 600 years behind where the Christians are, so you got to give us some more time.
Oh, I didn't know we were supposed to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, we're trying to even
legitimate.
things out. We're finally catching, and then every time they try to fix it, like bad things happen.
Hey, nice religion. How many people you killed?
If you shame us, something bad happened.
None yet. All right.
Well, get to it. Get to it, folks. So anyway, the Crusaders hold Jerusalem. Yay, everybody's happy, but not really.
Well, not the people in Jerusalem, I imagine.
Not really, because when the Crusaders took it in 1099, they killed everybody. And there weren't just Muslims living in Jerusalem. There were Jews, of course, because every time the Crusaders go anywhere, they kill the Jews too. Yeah. And Christians living in the city.
I'm surprised every time we talk about history and how the Jews have gotten the short end of the sword.
The long end, the pointy end of the sword.
Either way, I'm surprised that there are still Jewish people left.
It's amazing.
I don't want there to not be Jewish people.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
It's a testament to their strength and ability to survive.
Remarkable that every point in history they're getting killed and they're still around.
That's used as a dig against them. Because they're like, well, yeah, you know what else survives no matter what? Like, vermin. And then they're like, see? Like we said. And you're like, no. They're people, and they're doing... Like, you guys keep taking everything they have, and then they just keep surviving, because they're like, well, I guess this is our new life now. We'll go do this. And I think it's because they've been dealing with this crap for thousands of years. It's just like a natural adaptation that they've gotten, where they're like, yep, this is how you survive.
I now understand my perception of old Jewish people, which is...
Just tired.
This again?
Exactly. Like that could be like the tagline for their faith. This again? This is a Jewish motto. This again? They're like, oh, well, we're going to torture you. Oh, ooh, like I haven't been tortured before. Like, oh, we're going to take this. Oh, because I've never had something taken before. Bring it on. Bring it.
So this was not that crusade.
This is not that crusade. Then the Second Crusade was supposed to like kind of make sure Jerusalem stayed safe because things in the Levant is what they called that, the Holy Land, were not looking great for Jerusalem. Different Muslim factions were rising up and fighting, and they were all looking at Jerusalem like, we want this back. It's our holy city too, because Jerusalem's the holy city for Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Not Islam's most sacred city, that's Mecca in Saudi Arabia, but it is like their second most holy city. Maybe Aleppo might be number 2.
It's on the list.
But it's on the list. It's top 3. It's super important.
Okay.
So they want it too. It's also a massive center for like if you control it, you like all the pilgrims coming in. That's good for business. So it is a legitimate like.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's no financial incentive.
There's
at all.
definitely a financial incentive, and then there's like the point of pride. This was ours, and you took it from us. Give it back.
Right.
It's also a very impressive fortress. So having this massive fortified city is super useful for anybody in the region. What's unfortunate about the location of Jerusalem is it's inland. It doesn't have a port. And the most powerful cities at the time usually want a port. It doesn't have a river. It's just kind of in the middle of the desert. It has some big wells around it, but otherwise it's not ideally located.
It's got hills and stuff, right?
It's got hills. It's like rocky terrain.
Yeah, right.
When the Crusaders went there, they were really upset because they're like, this is the land of milk and honey, and it's dirt. Well, this is stupid.
Was there milk and honey as well?
Not really.
Not even milk and honey?
There might have been like some goat milk, but not cattle. Cattle can't survive there. There's nowhere to graze them. They can't survive. Goats, though, they're like, rocks, I didn't eat that.
Goat milk and rocks.
Yep, goat
Not
milk
quite
and
as
rocks. Not milk
honey.
and honey. They're like,
This granola is extra crunchy.
At around, in the mid-12th century,
Okay.
stuff really got shaken up with
No,
the
that's
different...
I'm sorry, that's
1100s. 1100s. Yep. You got to subtract one.
Yeah.
You got to subtract one. If it's the first century, it's the zeros.
Yeah.
Going.
I remember when I was years old.
It's the leading up to it. It's like your first year of life. Anyway. So there are various factions of Islamic. They're led by Muslim leaders, and the people are almost all Muslim. But it's not like it's this monolith.
Okay.
So which is why, like, nowadays when people say, like, well, Muslims do this and Muslims do that, that's actually super offensive and basically xenophobic and racist. Because if you lump all of one group together, it's the same as saying, well, all Christians are the same, or all Americans are the same, or all white people, or all black people, or all brown. Like, if any of that, you can't monolith it. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And at the time, the politics of this are really complicated. So this is before the Ottoman Empire shows up. Now that's when it really was like, that was a monolith. That was a huge empire that ruled over basically all of the Islamic states. All. It was a powerhouse. But this is before that. At this time, you have what they're called a caliphate, which is led by a different faction leader of Islam. Islam is split between the Shia and the Sunni, and I won't get into the details of it because I don't know them well enough and I don't want to offend by misinterpreting it.
I just recently read about that, and I didn't retain it, though.
It's basically over who is the proper heir to the Prophet Muhammad, who is his successor, and therefore who knows the faith best.
Yeah.
The two largest factions have different views on it, but then they have sub-factions that argue and fight amongst themselves.
It's like any factioning in any religion where the reason why they're faction is like
it's a very minuscule thing.
A thing like, but maybe just get over that one bit.
Right, and this has been going on for more than 1,000 years. Sure. When I was in Iraq, it was still an issue. The Sunnis in Iraq were in charge, but they were the minority. Yeah. The Shia were the majority, and they got treated like garbage by the Sunnis. And you couldn't like be a major leader in the cities or under Saddam because he was Sunni and he didn't care about the Shia. He hated them. But then in other places, the Shia did the same thing to the Sunni, and it's just awful. Like it's very similar to in Christianity how they treated the Protestants versus the Catholics.
Right.
There's lots of violence. Like I said, it's like they're just a few hundred years behind what Christianity was doing. So like anybody who's like, well, look how mean they are to each other. Like, dude, Christians did this for 1,000 years. The Muslims are actually ahead of the curve right now as far as that goes. But it led to a lot of sectarian violence. During this time, in Egypt, there was all kinds of like political maneuvering to try to figure out how to deal with the Crusader states.
Okay.
Because you've got a bunch of heavily armed and armored religious zealots wandering around in your territory, and they're really hard to deal with.
So now you said Crusader states. Once they're there, do they?
They stayed there.
But do they set up some? A government
They made a
of-
kingdom. They have a whole kingdom of Jerusalem, which
Okay.
lasted like 200 years.
So, but the Crusaders themselves also, they're like, "Oh, no, we're here, and here's our new system."
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So they basically the first Crusaders, when they got there, the top-ranking guy said, "Well, I'm a king now." His name was Godfrey de Bouillon, which is like the Golden.
Yeah.
Like he was a big deal, and he stuck out in a crowd. Like he was this huge blonde-haired, blue-eyed beefcake from France, and he was a heroic leader, and one of the guys who wasn't so much of a butcher, but it's a
Doesn't
really
wanna-
low bar.
Doesn't want to mess up his nice looks.
Really, it's a low bar. But then they start establishing like the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller, the different knightly orders to protect Jerusalem. They make their own flag, and it becomes hey, if you mostly are a poor nobleman, or like the son of the son, like your dad, you're not going to inherit, but you have arms and armor, come to Jerusalem, you'll be a knight, you might get some land, and you get to fight the infidels. So
Yay.
they constantly are importing people. And then the pilgrims are coming there, and some of them want to settle. But they typically treat anybody who's not a Christian like garbage. Some of the lords, though, start to acclimate to the area. They start to dress a little differently. They start to come up with a different style. And they start to befriend some of the local Muslims. Because they're living together.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of like how when people live in their own little enclaves of people just like them, they don't like anybody else. But
Yeah.
if you're forced to live together,
Yeah. And
You
talk
typically-
about things not religion.
you typically end up having to go, oh, well, we're not that different.
Oh,
We're
geez.
all people. Like, that's why in big cities you don't have as much of a us versus them, because you have to live next to each other, otherwise the city's on fire.
Yeah.
And that's historically just how it's always been. But then, like, you'll have, like, the Hatfields and McCoys, and they're like, I'm a farmer, you're a farmer, I hate you. But you're
Yeah.
different. You got a different name. So it's wild. So during this, like, the Crusader state's a problem. It
Yes.
is it's like super militant. They're
Yeah.
building castles all over, and they're squatting in old territory.
Yeah.
And the
Started
Muslims-
bad. In
Yeah,
general.
started bad. It's conquest. They're all foreigners. None of them very few of them speak the language, and now they're setting up these military orders that are making sure things go on. Most of the time, though, they try to work around their neighbors now. They realize, okay, we've taken territory, now
Yeah.
we have to act like a kingdom. We can't just be a roving army that kills everything.
Yeah.
Plus, it's made up of a lot of people from different cultures and different, like, philosophies, and they're almost all, like, trained killers with small armies.
Oh.
So, this is not a democracy, but it basically functions like one because all the barons are from different places. They
Sure.
don't want to necessarily listen to somebody.
And every vote we can't just murder.
Exactly. So you have to set up, like you said, a system.
Yes.
So they have a king. This king makes some alliances, talks to different people, and eventually starts to break them down. And it's several lines of kings. So there's a few Baldwins, Alec,
Yep.
Stephen,
Stephen.
William,
Yep.
Daniel. Kidding. But there's like 4 King Baldwins. There's Godfrey, and eventually it ends up being Guy de Lusignan, who's a very famous Frenchman.
Gee.
Infamous is probably the better way to describe
Right.
him, because he wasn't good at what he did. At this time, though, all these Muslims are seeing what's going on, all these different factions, and in Egypt, there's a sudden shift in power, because when one of the kings of Jerusalem makes an alliance and then violently breaks it by just raiding across Egypt and butchering a bunch of people and killing folk,
Yeah.
it makes them all go, whoa, 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 this is a problem.
Yeah.
This is a problem.
We have alliances for a reason.
This is a problem.
All right.
Born in 1137, don't know the specific date, is a young man named, well, he's a very young man when he's born.
Sure.
Yusuf.
Almost zero.
Almost, he's 0, yeah. He's 1 century.
Yep.
Yusuf ibn Ayub.
Ooh.
Yusuf is Joseph.
Yep.
Yusuf is kind of the heir apparent of his predecessor, whose name I should have written down, who was kind of seen as a uniter. And he was like the powerhouse in Egypt. Egypt had a problem with like a corrupt vizier who made like deals with the Christians, but then when the Christians stabbed him in the back, they're like, "You're out!"
Oh.
And then he got like sent to Aleppo.
I've never trusted a vizier since.
Never trust a vizier
Not
since
since
Aladdin.
Aladdin, yeah.
Never trust the vizier. But he got kicked out and sent to Aleppo. Aleppo is a holy city and a very difficult fortress. The Crusaders tried to crack it several times, never could. It's a very strong fortress city. I think the only way it finally got dealt with for a while was there was a massive earthquake that like almost leveled the city.
Well, that's
not funny.
That's
but
some
it's
old.
like,
That's some Old Testament
that's
stuff.
That's Old Testament stuff. Like, well, we can't break it. God, ha.
Let me look back in the book.
Exactly.
Oh, here's from the first couple chapters.
Gotcha. So that guy in Aleppo was like, okay, stuff in Egypt is crazy. He sends one of his top generals to go in and basically kill the leaders of Egypt. And so this is a proof that not all Muslims are the same. These are different countries. These are different factions.
Yes.
After that leader dies, his heir takes his place, Yusuf. And Yusuf is given the title Salah ad-Din. So Salah al-Din is another pronunciation, and that means goodness of faith. So not bloody-handed murderer,
Hey,
not
it's a good nickname to
monster, goodness of faith. So Salah al-Din, Saladin is how we pronounce it now. In the westernization, it's just spelled Saladin, Saladin, but Salah is Salah, Al-Din, D-I-N. And so Saladin starts to see it as, okay, this is the chance to unify all of us against the Crusader states. All of us.
Yeah.
And he starts to basically spread propaganda that he's going to be this great uniter for all of Islam. Oh. He never picks a side between the different caliphates. He says he serves them both because he serves God.
There we go.
It's a very smart maneuver.
You're thinking, Salah.
His first battle is not good. He gets his butt kicked by the Crusaders.
Can't win with just propaganda.
Because he kind of, it seems like he kind of sets it up badly.
Okay.
He's just like, well, I'll just kind of half-handle it. Then he realizes, I've been saying this about myself. I'm talking this big game. I need to actually do this. Yeah. I need to actually back up what I'm suggesting, and I really can, because he has a vision about, like, not like a vision. He might.
Maybe.
Don't know. But he is a visionary of his time of a united front against these people, regardless of different cultures, different clans. We share a faith. That's what they're doing to us, and that's why they keep beating all of our armies and crushing all our countries. Okay. So why don't we do it back?
Yeah, let's work together.
And then we can like hold our own land. He's also a philosopher. He's very kind of introspective. He's able to take his failures and learn from them. Very well-respected guy amongst his community, and to this day, he's considered one of the great heroes of the Arabic world, because he also wasn't a big-time mass murderer, which again, at the time, super low bar, you think, but he is like that's admirable, because there are times where like killing prisoners makes sense, because you have a big army, you have to move quickly because another army's coming. Sometimes prisoners get killed, or they killed your prisoners, so you kill their prisoners right back, so you show we're not to be trifled with. It's a very it's gross either way, right? This is not good. We can't justify this, so we still have mass murders and giant wars. But this guy's trying to do it in a way that's not like, let's just genocide him.
Let's try not to do a genocide.
Just not genocide. Let's do some other things.
Well,
so he starts to
admirable.
I think so. He starts to consolidate power, and he sets his eyes on Jerusalem.
Ooh.
He says, well, that's the crown jewel. That's their capital, and that's the thorn in our side. So he has a few smaller battles leading up to this, and he gains great credibility. He's able to gather massive armies because all these different guys are like, this guy knows what's up. He must be divinely inspired. He's guided by God.
Seems like a nice guy.
He's not picking sides on anything. He's uniting. He's using all of the proper like channels. It's a very impressive feat for the time. And he tends to like lead the armies in person, not like necessarily always in the front, because eventually he starts to get older, but he's got a brilliant strategic mind. He's able to figure out, well, we go here, we go here. He knows where like all the lines of supply are, where all the wells are, which is really important in desert warfare.
Yes, it's true. Thirsty out there.
Meanwhile, Guy de Lusignan, he's born in 1150.
Who?
Guy de Lusignan. He's the king of Jerusalem. His last name is spelled Lusignan. The Lusignans are a French family. They've been all over the place. But he came as a crusader and eventually becomes king. Because he marries the king's sister, Sibylla. Sibylla is kind of a powerhouse on her own. She's very smart. She's allegedly very attractive. And she is known for being kind of fierce and able to stand up and say, this is what we need to do. She's not like a field commander or anything like that. But as a medieval woman...
powerful woman.
She's a strong, powerful woman.
Right,
she knows what's what. She also knows her value.
Oh, okay.
As the king's sister, and the king has a terminal illness like his whole life. I believe he's a leper. That's what they said. Which is the worst disease in Christianity.
Yeah.
That's just like, you did something bad. So, leprosy for you.
Someone doesn't like you somewhere.
God hates you.
Yeah.
Leprosy. So she knows her worth as a woman, as a strong character, and she, to save the realm, apparently, she marries Guy de Lusignan.
Okay. Just for that? Or
Yep. He's like the most powerful guy in the state.
Okay.
And she knows when her brother Baldwin dies, somebody's got to take over. This will prevent a faction from arising and having a bunch of problems. Because Guy has a rival. His name is Conrad de Montferrat. It's Montferrat. Might be Montferrat. Remember, in French, the consonants don't matter.
That's right.
Conrad is another knight, warrior, good at fighting, good at leading. He's inspirational. He's seen as kind of a kingly figure. He doesn't like Guy. They don't like each other at all. Conrad thinks he should have been king because he's actually has a closer blood tie to the king than Guy does. But because the king's sister married Guy, Conrad's out of the picture.
And they're going to be king of Jerusalem?
Jerusalem.
Okay.
So Jerusalem is just the name of their entire Crusader state.
Yeah,
that's a chunk of what is the modern-day Holy Land. It's like parts of Jordan, Israel.
I just didn't know how far the king title stretched for that.
Right. It doesn't go back to like Europe. So this is controlling this. Conrad is in charge of the city of Tyre, Tyre, which the British, that's how they spell Tyre.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it's pronounced, Tyre. And that is like a mighty fortress city. It is very impressive, and it's a port. It's actually considered one of the, if not the most valuable Crusader possession, one of them. Because that's where all the people come from. If you want to go to Jerusalem, you go to Tyre first.
Okay.
And then you go on to Jerusalem.
Because you can't park your boat in Jerusalem.
You can't park it. I mean, you could, but you got to park it on the beach and then drag it a couple 100 miles overland.
Sorry about the other side of your boat there, pal. You wanted it in Jerusalem. We had to drag it across.
We were happy to oblige. I mean, I feel like the Vikings probably would. Y'all were going to run this over the land. And we're in Jerusalem. Why do we come here with the boat? Just to say we could.
Run it back.
Go back. We just said we could because we're Vikings. It's like, couldn't we have taken a better way? Not to get to Jerusalem. There's no water. This is stupid. We're not going here anymore. Fine.
This is the worst Viking accent.
This is a terrible Viking accent. So Saladin makes his move to go to Jerusalem, and Guy is like, I gotta stop this guy. So Guy de Lusignan gathers the mightiest army the Crusaders have ever seen.
Okay.
It is thousands of knights and tens of thousands of infantry, and he leaves Jerusalem with all of its defenders and its mightiest champions to go and face Saladin.
Oh, so he leaves?
He leaves the city. Rather than hold
Right.
one of the greatest fortresses in the world, like this giant fortress city that is almost impossible to surround, where they're well supplied, they have water and all this, he chases down Saladin. Saladin is known for having, and this is kind of a thing in Arabic warfare, very mobile cavalry. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have super heavy cavalry. They do have some. There were different cultures that had like heavy cavalry. but he's like all about hit and run tactics and moving and staying mobile. It also is stupid to wear super heavy armor in the desert when
Yeah.
it's 100 degrees.
Yeah, I bet that gets hot.
Saladin also knows, like I said, where all the wells are, and he pollutes all the wells
Oh.
as his army moves away from the city.
Ooh.
And Guy follows him through desolate wasteland.
This water
where
tastes-
all the water is poisoned.
This water tastes funny than anyone else.
Yep. Soldiers start to die from exhaustion, from the heat, from dehydration, from the poisoned wells.
Eek.
They don't have enough supplies. Their army's bigger, and he gets them to this place called the Horns of Hattin, which are like two big hills. And he draws the Crusaders in, and he annihilates the army. It's a massacre. The Crusaders are unprepared. They're tired. He gets them stuck on a hill. He sets the hill on fire.
What?
He smokes them out. They're already dying from thirst, and eventually they have to surrender. The
Oh,
king of
man.
Jerusalem is captured.
Oh no! What was
And
he doing out there?
He led the army. He's like, I'm gonna go kill him. I can do this. And he
I'm telling
fails.
you. I'm telling you. After the second poison well, I'm heading back home.
Exactly. I'd get to one. I'd be like, do you think they're all like this? Send some scouts ahead.
Yeah. All this water tastes.
This
fine.
is really bad. And he was advised, don't do this. The guy knows the terrain. He's trying to lead you on, and he's
Yeah.
just too proud. And his army got annihilated. Like, it was very bad. We'll probably do an episode about it, so I won't talk too much about it.
Oh, okay.
But it was just a stupid move.
Okay.
So, it's like tens of thousands killed.
Well done, Guy.
Yep. So basically the entire military of the Crusader state is gone.
Whoops.
And the king is captured along with the true cross, which is apparently what Jesus was nailed to.
They kept that thing.
Yeah, they kept that. Apparently, allegedly,
Well, and
nobody's
then-
really sure.
until they lost it.
That's what the Crusaders say. They reclaimed the cross when they retook the Holy Land,
Sure.
and that was one of the artifacts they had. And they would
And-
carry it into battle.
but now
it
they
was
lost
this
it.
giant thing covered in gold that they tried to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Saladin has the king, the cross, and a whole bunch of other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
plus a bunch of knights, a bunch of just soldiers. He's
Yeah.
got whatever supplies and loot they had with them. He's
His pawns, all his rooks.
He's got everything.
Yeah.
Yep. A couple bishops, literally,
Sure.
actually, a couple bishops, because bishops used to go to war back then.
Oh, yeah.
Then he goes to Jerusalem, where they have just a tiny little army.
The guys who couldn't make it on the
Exactly. It's like, you're too old to fight. You can't do anything.
We
They
didn't think.
surprisingly fight.
Well, what else are they gonna
Because
do?
they can't do much, and they put.
This
up
is our
a-
time,
Yep,
fellas.
Exactly. There's a film made about.
Someone
this.
help me with a sword. It's heavy.
Called The Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom.
Okay.
It's largely like all the things are changed in it, and I have like a lot of issues with it because they do certain tactics and strategies wrong, or like the way that certain bits of armor work, they don't seem to work. Like against like they're slashing people with swords and they're just killing them right away. And it's
Yeah.
like, but they're wearing chainmail, so that should protect them, but it doesn't.
Historical accuracy in fictionalized
Yep.
films.
I
is,
I tend to get a little picky about
get
that,
it.
but
Yeah, that makes sense.
but also, it's you want to do style. Liam Neeson's in it. Go Liam Neeson for a little bit anyway.
Sure.
It's a great film, and they really do
What
a
was that called?
fantastic depiction of Saladin. Kingdom of Heaven.
Kingdom of Heaven.
I think the movie's almost 20 years old now. God, it stinks getting old. I think it was Ridley Scott did it. It was really close to being really good. I think it was just okay.
Okay.
So anyway, the Crusaders, they're not really Crusaders anymore. These are just the people that live in Jerusalem.
Right.
Like, they were the ones who weren't Crusaders.
They're now doing a reverse crusade anyway.
Yeah,
So,
so they have this leader who's like the defender of Jerusalem. I'm trying to remember his name. It's not Bohemond. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of our story. But he eventually realized we can't possibly win. Saladin's army is like,
all our good guys.
the army's dead. We have like 2 knights. A bunch of the knights left when they saw that this was going to happen. I'm done.
Yeah.
And so he cuts a deal. It's like the reverse Moses. Let my people go.
Okay.
And Saladin does. He lets the people leave Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
He escorts them to safety
Goodbye.
to make sure the bandits don't hit them.
Yep.
And then anybody else who wants to stay is allowed to stay. He does not loot the city. He does not burn the city. He does not massacre anybody.
Oh, nice.
He closes the churches down for 3 days to make sure everything's cleaned out. Then he reopens the churches to let people in. He does convert the main church, the Temple on the Mount, into what is now, I think it's, I don't want to get the name wrong, but it is now one of the largest mosques in the Middle East. Yeah. And he's just like, nope, disarm out.
But he didn't convert all of them, just the one
just
big
that
one.
main one.
Well, that was mighty nice of him.
Because, well, he saw that, I think it was originally a Muslim mosque. Sure. And then the Crusaders took it like, it's a church now. And he's like, no, it's a mosque again. And this is ours.
Rabbit season.
And it's like
duck season.
And it's
rabbit season.
This is all built on top of the original Jewish temple, which got destroyed by the Romans. Sure. So they're like, it's just building on top of building on top of building, and then mine. Yep. It's literally like when you grab the baseball bat to see who goes first, and whoever gets to the
Except
top.
you can keep building a bat on top of it.
Adding, or have another bat and hit the guy. All right, so we're half an hour in, and I haven't even gotten to what Acre is.
This is on you.
This is totally on me.
Less tangents. Come on.
This is a huge event. So that's the setting of our world now. The Third Crusade starts to get Jerusalem back because they're like, well, that's bad.
We had the one thing. We
had the one thing, and then we sent these other guys there to try to stop this. But they basically, the Second Crusade, they just fought each other, and they wouldn't stop arguing. And then I think it was the Turks got sick of their crap and just killed them and drove them off.
Okay.
So it went really bad. It was the French and the Germans, and they just hated each other.
Wow.
They did not get along. So the Third Crusade starts, and this one is called the King's Crusade because almost everybody involved is not some lesser noble. They're kings.
Okay.
In
Time
France,
to bring in the CEOs.
Exactly. In France, we get Philip II called Augustus because he reclaimed a massive amount of French territory, and he was considered like... His father was the guy who got basically turned into just a little dweeby follower by King Henry of England, who was like that great king.
Yeah.
And then Henry's kids are Richard, and Richard grew up knowing Philip II.
Okay.
There are allegations that maybe they knew each other intimately, but there's nothing for certain about it.
Tell me
because
more.
Richard is known to have just like an unslakable thirst for women, including his cousin. First cousin, not second cousin. First
unslakable thirst doesn't say he's not gonna go after the fellas too.
That's true. He might have just been like,
Yep.
I like everything. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a play written that talks about that called The Lion in Winter, which is all about King Henry, his wife, and their sons, who all suck because they're jerks.
Oh, okay.
And then Philip's in it, and he's kind of played as like effete and brilliant because Philip was without a doubt brilliant. In some of the depictions of him, they say he was kind of weak, but the French always describe him as handsome but bald. But bald can mean like without tact. Sometimes it can just mean very bold.
Bald.
So it might not mean that he's actually bald with no hair.
Okay.
It could just mean he's forceful.
Not that would be an insult either way.
Not an insult. So there's Philip II, who is the opposite of his dad. He is no man's dog. He's the king of France, and he's not going to be pushed around by England.
Bring it.
Even though the English try to say, well, Richard kind of told him what to do, because we'll get to that.
They can say whatever they want.
Meanwhile, after basically driving his father to die out of a broken heart, Richard I becomes king of England.
Hey.
He hates England with a passion. He spent 6 months of his reign there, and he was like total of his life possibly. And he lived into his 40s. He would just use it to raise money to go on crusade. Because he liked to fight. He liked to kill people. He was really good at it. From the age of 16, he was leading armies.
Like to vacation in the south with my sword.
Henry trusted his son to fight rival barons and set him up to put down rebellions. So at age 16, Richard is out there, which is technically earlier than he should have been a proper knight.
Yeah, probably.
And he was leading armies successfully against grown men who were warriors and spent years fighting, and he put them down, and he was a terror. Like, people were terrified of him. And then he got power hungry, and he kept rebelling against his father, and people kept going, yeah, let's fight with Richard.
He's real good at it.
He's crazy. But Richard historically is described as standing like well over 6 feet tall, with a mane of like golden to reddish hair, and was built like a body, like he's huge. He was just huge.
At 16?
Maybe not at 16, but he's a big kid
Okay.
at 16.
Sure.
He'd have been huge. But he's, one of these guys who's just, all he does is fight. And when all you do is fight and wear armor and ride on a horse all day, you become tough and big and strong. And he's naturally predisposed to that because of who his father was a big guy. And we find that all the Plantagenet kings, most of them are pretty big. Edward the Longshanks is described later on. That was Richard's, I think, grandson.
Okay.
So, or John's grandson, sorry. So, grandnephew. It's weird.
I'll start drawing a family
Yeah,
tree.
the tree gets real weird. Because Richard his kid, I think, died. I don't think he had any heirs.
Okay.
Unfortunate. He had a daughter, but that was it.
That don't count.
Don't count. And then in Austria, we have Leopold V, who I don't know nearly enough about.
Leopold.
He is a duke, because Austria doesn't really have a king.
Okay.
But he's a powerhouse, too.
I still count as a king.
Counting very powerful.
Okay, Leopold.
And then in Germany, which is the Holy Roman Empire, huge swath of land, and I think actually Austria counts as a duchy of the Holy Roman Empire. I think it's a part of it.
Yeah, because Germany wasn't really Germany.
No, Germany's not Germany
Germany's
until
always
like
been-
the late 1800s.
It's been always kind of a
Yep.
vague.
There's
middle parts of
it's this
Germany.
they call it like Germany, but it's like Bavaria, it's Austria,
Yeah.
it's a million things. But at this time, it's just the Holy Roman Empire,
Yeah.
and Austria is a part of that, I believe. I don't want to get that wrong.
But likely.
But
Makes
likely.
sense.
Which would make sense for why their leader is a duke.
Yes.
It's a huge. Austria's huge. It's like bigger than France. It's a really big chunk of land, and so Leopold is sent.
Leopold.
Is like, I'll do this. I'll take up the cross. But more importantly, his overlord Friedrich Barbarossa,
Ooh.
who is considered like one of the preeminent military minds of his time. Now, this guy's like 60 at this point, but he's very scary. This guy basically told the Pope to stick it up his bum and that he didn't have to listen to him. He marched an army on the Pope after the Pope excommunicated him. He said, "What did you say to me?" And the Pope's like, "Oh, no, I didn't say anything." He said, "You're not excommunicated." "That's what I thought."
Wow.
And then the Pope, then he actually like apologized to the Pope
I
because
shouldn't.
the Pope was
It
like,
was
"I
way
can
too
excommunicate you the second you leave this country." But he was the guy who kind of united the Holy Roman Empire into believing that they should just have a king,
Okay.
like an overlord. Like they had a guy, but he didn't really have a lot of power. This guy was like, "Everybody get up and go and fight the other guy that I told you to go fight." So these are the forces that are starting to go, let's go take back Jerusalem. Not, I'm a little knight, and I'm a peasant, and we're going to go fight. These are professional soldiers with lifetime careers as soldiers, with professional armies of knights, and they're ready to go. So
That's
the
right.
armies are actually smaller in some cases, but they're trained, and they're really good at killing people
Okay.
instead of peasant with stick.
This is not their first crusade.
This is, I mean, first in the Holy Land, but they've been killing people for
Sure.
a long time. And now they're like, well, let's take our skills and apply it elsewhere.
Here we go.
So,
Road trip.
meanwhile, back in the Holy Land, Guy is penniless, armyless,
Yeah, well, that's his own
hopeless
fault.
because he's an idiot.
Gee.
An armistice is signed with Saladin saying, let's take a little break. He basically says, the Crusaders can stay in the Holy Land under my leadership.
Okay.
So you just don't have, nobody has to do nothing.
Sure.
Just pay taxes. So he's willing to let Christians live freely as long as he's basically the
Seems
king.
reasonable.
Or they have 40 days to pack their stuff and get out.
Also seems reasonable.
Which they do.
Yep.
That's what most of them do. But anyone who stays behind just becomes a citizen.
Okay.
Okay. So that was like the surrender of Jerusalem. On top of this, he offers the ransom of Guy de Lusignan, King Guy. Guy is freed.
Yay.
And he goes to the next largest fortress, Tyr, where his good buddy Conrad is in charge.
Hey.
And Conrad tells him to go away.
Well,
He doesn't even let him in the city. He's like, king of mine, remember when you led that army and I said don't do it and you did it anyway and then you lost?
Yeah, well.
Also, where's the cross?
I don't.
What happened to Jerusalem?
It was really dusty out
Was
there.
it dusty?
I don't know.
Why didn't you bring water?
We had a plan.
You had a plan? I told you not to do it.
But
Yeah? What? More?
can I just come in and use your bathroom?
Nope. Nope. You can pee right out there in the dust.
Oh,
Oh,
so dusty.
this water's
Oh.
delicious, Guy. And then Guy says, you know what? I'm going to go get my wife.
Yeah.
And she's going to tell you what for, because she's the queen, and she outranks you.
Good job, Guy.
He goes and gets his wife.
Yeah.
Sibylla's like, oi, let us in. And Conrad says, no, I'm waiting for some friends.
You know what? Good for you, Conrad.
Good for Conrad. He's just like, no.
Yeah.
I'm sick of your
Can you
crap.
imagine that scenario in general? No, you can't come in. My wife will tell you you can't. Listen to me.
And I just picture him just
Like
walking back.
like a Karen coming
Yep,
in.
he comes
I want to
back a week
speak to the
later.
manager.
And
Here.
I just feel like Sibylla's sitting there like, oh my God. I'm sorry for my husband. He's a tool. Can you let us in? He's like, no.
No.
I think he was probably more courteous to her. He's like,
Sure.
well, you can come in and hang out, but he's got to stay outside.
Okay.
Because he just doesn't respect Guy at all.
Yeah.
And he's like, you lost our kingdom.
Welcome in. Yeah. One question. Did you lead an army
Saladin
to...
deliberately lets Guy go because he knows it's going to cause problems.
Mm.
Because he knows nobody likes this moron.
Yeah.
Guy is starting to say, you guys have to give me an army so I can take Jerusalem.
I used to be somebody.
And Conrad says, no. Meanwhile, Saladin has been attacking Tyr for a while, since it's the main port.
Okay.
So this is probably, this is before Guy shows up.
Okay.
And he's besieged it, and Conrad is just, nope, you're not coming in. I have ships supplying me. I got soldiers. We've been waiting for this. We saw what you did, and we weren't stupid enough to march out into the desert. Probably also has some of the guys who fled Jerusalem when they saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very tough nut to crack. This is a fortress city on the water. Saladin's just like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Also, he finds out that there are Crusaders coming.
Oh.
So he doesn't want to deal with that. He says, I'm going to go to my supply depot at Acre. I'm going to arm up, and I'm coming back. And he does. He goes to Acre, which is another massive, like these cities on the water are huge, like walled off. Just, it's impossible to attack them from the land easily. These are 30-foot, 40-foot walls. Some of them are 20 feet thick or more in places. You can ride horses across the top. They have massive bastions, which is a tower fixed into the building itself. Acre has a pretty cool one called the Tower of Flies. I don't know why it's called that. I should probably have studied this up. I think it's because of the amount of people they killed outside of it. There were flies all over.
So I guess
That's my
probably
guess.
something
That's my guess.
with death.
That's my guess. Also, if you jump off, it's like he flies.
Whee!
Or maybe that's the manure tower. They just put all the poop around it.
Who
Tower of
knows?
Flies.
This is where we keep our flies.
All our garbage and stuff goes here, and that's where the flies come from.
Perfect.
So Acre is another mighty fortress city. So it's basically a tale of two mega big fortress cities. A tale of two cities.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. I didn't want to.
A
But
tale of two mega fortress cities.
Yep.
That'd be an easier way to say that.
A tale of two towns.
Yeah.
Tale of two towers. The two towers. Ah! Oh, that's no. We can't.
Yeah.
He can't say anything anymore. Somebody's already written it. So Saladin goes there and waits. Leopold shows up with his guys with supplies and troops, and he's like, "All right, what's going on?" And Guy is finally like, "Let me in the city.
I know that guy.
Saladin's right there. He's gonna kill everybody.
Yeah.
Let's unite now, okay?"
Yeah, listen to Guy.
Conrad agrees. Okay, we have a mutual.
listen to
threat.
Conrad,
Now,
okay.
Now we have a mutual threat. Okay, fine. So actually, yeah, it is. Guy shows up, begging, yelling, demanding. Then he leaves, and while he's gone, Saladin attacks Tyr. And then when he leaves, Guy comes back, and I just picture he hit behind a rock. Is he gone? Did you see what I was telling you about? Look how scary that guy is. He's got this huge army. He doesn't like anybody. Threat.
Yeah.
Let's go kill him.
Let's get him.
He's hiding in Acre.
Let's poison his water.
Yeah. So they do. They get an army together. It's like 5,000 guys. It's
Okay.
not a huge army.
Technically an army.
So the estimates range all over the place at this time, depending on whose side you're on.
Okay.
I found an average one that seems about right, because some stated it was as many as 10,000 men, some said it was lower. So 7,000 infantry sounds about right. And then the knights, it varies from 400 to 700, which is a great, like, knights are used to, like, stiffen the ranks and toughen people up. You put a dude in heavy armor with every, like, 10 guys, and they're going to they're going
Yeah.
to fight harder in like an infantry engagement. Otherwise, if you just have a block of steel on horseback, there's really nothing that stops that.
Yeah.
In this setting, like until you start developing like pikeman formations again, figuring that out, they're just really almost impossible to stop. And that's not how the Arabs fight. They don't have these heavy shock cavalry tactics.
Right.
So if they send their cavalry against the Christian cavalry, they're just like pfft, and scatter them usually.
Yeah.
So they start having to develop tactics around that. So this is let's see. This is in 20 of August, or not 20 of August. So this is in 1189 in the summer. This is July in the summer. Yep. 1189, and that's when they go and they start to surround it. Saladin goes, not cool, and he shows up on October 4th, 1189, with 30,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry.
Well, that's far more.
That's far more. Now the Crusaders are getting like an influx of troops, so this is
Sure.
while they're there surrounding this place. That's when Leopold shows up with his guys. And he's like, "So
Hey.
we're taking this city? Cool. What's that?" And Saladin's like, "Ha! I've caught you." He immediately attacks and gets beaten.
Really?
Yes,
Huh.
because all of the Templars pile up on one flank and just rout Saladin's flank. Like they just, it's like we talked about before. Most armies are set up with a center, a left, and a right. The Templar are all on one chunk, and they hammer Saladin's right so badly. He's like, guys from the middle and the left, get over there. They're getting their butts kicked.
But by that time, it's too late.
It's too late,
No.
and it's just like you're trying to spit on a fire.
I can't fight on the right side. I'm a lefty.
But because he's pulling guys from all over the place, the Crusaders like, okay, we'll just keep killing here and here.
Sure.
And the pressure never stops. And they've got crossbows, so that punctures through any armor the Turks not the Turks, but the Turks, the Egyptians, the Arabs. It's this
Saladin's
whole
army.
Saladin's army. It's the whole conglomerate of different people and different factions. Saladin's army routs. They're just like, okay, this is enough. And they just run away.
All right.
And the Crusaders, rather than follow, loot his camp.
Oh.
Treasure!
Okay.
Saladin rides around and gathers his army back together because they didn't all die or anything. They just
Right.
ran.
Yeah.
And he's like, they didn't follow us.
That's
And they're
weird.
just stealing our stuff. Get them!
We left the crappy stuff behind anyway.
Now, he's got 2,000 light cavalry, which are great for harrying, which is like chasing around behind somebody, shooting them with arrows,
Right.
picking off stragglers, hitting people in retreat. That's the perfect time. You send those guys in and they just kill everything,
Okay.
which is what he does. He sends them after the looters.
Oh, okay.
And now the Crusaders run away. And as they run, the army in Acre, who are besieged, go, let's get them! So they charge out of the city and attack the Crusaders in the rear. So the Crusaders are sandwiched between like 5,000 guys from the city and Saladin's 20,000 man army.
Oh,
and
boy.
it looks really bad.
Yeah.
And somehow they hold out.
Oh.
Saladin's army is wiped out. They're not wiped out, but like destroyed, but tired. They're just exhausted because they've been running back and forth.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were like, okay, we keep hitting them, and they just won't die, and they won't stop. And the Crusaders outnumber the guys charging out of the city,
Yeah.
so they get pushed back into the city. And the Crusaders take a sit at the end of it, and it's estimated that, the Arab source is that 10,000 men die. Their estimation is 4,000 to 5,000, which is still a big chunk of
Right.
their army, which at the time is maybe like 10 to 15,000.
Oh.
So that's like half their guys die.
But they still won.
But they still beat, yes, because you have to look at it in terms of what was the objective. The objective was to make the Crusaders go away or die, and they didn't. And Saladin had to back off. So
But it's
he's
not
like,
going to help the Crusaders feeling righteous, is it?
No.
They're going to feel more righteous.
Yeah,
now.
because they're like, we all lived. Let's take a sit. Most of their knights are alive because their armor is amazing.
Right.
So probably what they lost
And
most
God
of,
was on their side.
Yeah. And mostly what they probably lost were infantry who don't have horses to run away on. That's
Okay.
the whole perk
Sure.
of a horse is, oh crap, they're coming back.
I'd run away, but not by myself.
I feel like most of the knights were like, we can get the stuff after we kill all of them. What are you guys doing? Where's the infantry?
Some stuff.
And then the other knights like, who cares? We don't need infantry. They're just stupid peasants. Ah! Because that's really how a lot of knights thought.
Probably.
The peasants don't matter. The infantry don't matter. But no, like almost no army ever wins without infantry support.
Yeah.
After you charge in, you need somebody to fill in the gaps behind you so you don't get surrounded and murdered.
Yeah, but as someone on a horse, it's probably easy to overlook that.
Literally. Wow. Wah, wah. But literally, yeah, it is. They're literally looking down at everything around them and they just don't care. So this is just chaos. And Saladin says, okay, I got to take a break. I've lost a lot of men. That went poorly. I really thought we had it.
It really went better when it was on my territory.
All right, let's take a break. So news comes in that Barbarossa's on his way with a huge army of like 20,000 knights and trained men-at-arms who know how to get stuff done.
Yeah, we've heard about this guy too.
Yeah. And Barbarossa means Redbeard. There are two famous Barbarossas. There's Friedrich Barbarossa of Germany, and then there's Barbarossa the Pirate, who was a Muslim.
This was not them.
This is not the Muslim.
Got it.
If he shows up, he's a couple centuries early.
Yeah.
And the Crusaders are in so much trouble because he was really scary. So news comes in that this is happening. Conrad, meanwhile, says, poking the wall with sticks isn't really getting it done. And since we have some time now, let's fortify the camp, so they do, and let's go get supplies to build war machines. So he sails to nearby island, I think it was Cyprus that he went to, gets supplies, comes back, builds war machines. They lead this huge assault on May 5th, and every single war machine is destroyed.
Oh.
The Turks, not the Turks, I shouldn't say the
better
Turks.
war machines.
So the Arabs throw fire pots, which is basically flaming tar.
Yeah.
And burn everything to the ground. There was like a huge siege tower.
Why do we build our war machines out of wood?
Well, and the thing is, like, they even used copper plating on some of these things because they were like, "Oh yeah, fire pots are bad. Like,
Sure.
we don't want that. We don't want the arrows and the flaming arrows." But
Don't worry, it won't burn with this.
But still, the core is wood.
Well, we didn't think about that.
So they get one, conflagration, everybody dies.
Yeah.
And siege towers. They're those big things on wheels that they always show in the movies. Like they push them up closer,
Like a
and the
scaffolding.
drawbridge drops,
Yeah.
and everybody piles off. Most of the time, those were just built so they were taller than the walls, and they'd have firing platforms with archers,
Yeah.
and they'd shoot down. Some were built so they had siege engines built into them. So you'd have a catapult at the base just going, or a battering ram with like an iron cap to batter into the walls while you had this firing platform. So they built like this massive siege tower. And it
Still
got set on fire.
flammable.
Still flammable. Everybody died because it took enough damage that the plating went away, and then they kill everybody. Wah, wah.
At least.
Now, Saladin, seeing that they got their army destroyed, sends in his army again,
Yeah, here we go again.
for 8 days they fight. 8 solid days of his army just hammering down on the Crusader camps. He's now split it into 2 camps, so he has like a wedge towards the city. And the Crusaders, there's not enough of them to fully surround it, and they're just getting hammered on all sides. It's relentless, but after 8 days, they still haven't killed them all. They still are holding out. And he finally backs up. He's like, why won't they die? This is so stupid. I'm fighting for God. And they're like, yeah, but we're fighting for God. Ugh, this is stupid. Meanwhile, everybody inside the city is like, can you just kill him already? And he's like, I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. And he has to watch this city of his people surrounded, and they're struggling. But, man, are they valiantly defending this place. Like, there's breaches made in the walls, and then the people just swarm in. Like, on multiple occasions, the Crusaders almost get in, and then they stop them. They just, nope, you can't come in. It's like this last-ditch effort, and the Crusaders, we're so close. We can't get in.
The advantage is, the house always has the advantage. Right?
Yep.
Right.
So, in October of 1190, Frederick VI of Swabia arrives. He's Barbarossa's son, and he says, my dad died.
Oh.
On the way. Barbarossa's dead.
Oh.
He had a heart attack and fell off his horse in a river and he drowned.
Oh.
There's, I think it's apocryphal. I don't think this actually happened, but he wanted to be stuffed in a barrel and brought to Jerusalem. So there's like the story of the pickled emperor who was stuffed in a barrel and brought to the Holy Land to fight at the head of the army and all this stuff. And I don't think that actually happened because I couldn't find a source that said, yeah, that did. But it's a nice story.
It does sound like
it's
a rumor.
fun story, but I don't think an emperor's going to be like, pickle me! Pickle me! And I don't think his son would be like, I pickled my dad to bring him back. He might have brought his bones or something to lay it at rest in the Holy Land. That would make sense.
And that's how the rumor gets started.
But yeah, put him in a barrel. He might have had a big barrel of pickles.
Maybe.
And then also had his dad's bones.
Sure.
Like, that would make sense to me. But they're like, no, it's the same wagon. It's all the same thing. After Frederick gets there, he dies of disease. Because that winter, disease sweeps through the Crusader camp. Because they're running out of water. They keep getting killed. It's super hot. They're close confines. They're besieged. They're not well supplied. It's horror. So they're just dying. Like, half their leaders die. Conrad's still kicking.
Okay.
Guy's still kicking.
Yeah, of course.
Sibylla dies.
Oh, Sibylla. We hardly knew you.
We hardly knew her, but she was great.
Yeah.
Well, now, Guy's claim is gone.
Oh, that's right.
He's not directly tied to the throne
now
anymore.
he's just a-
So Conrad just like, shut up, Guy, I'm in charge. And Conrad takes over. He's like, I'm in charge of this thing.
It's probably for the best.
You suck at this. And Conrad's really been like the nominal leader anyway, because he's the only one with an army. Guy's just kind of a guy, but he's a figurehead. Well, now Conrad's in charge. He's claiming leadership over everything.
Good. Go for it, Conrad.
So, let's see. Where is that going? All right. So everyone's dying of some horrible illness. January 6th, the Christians finally break through. Like, they crack a hole in the city. And they rush in, and they almost take, like, the citadel, which is, like, the main fortress. And somehow the defenders drive them back out of the city, and there's just this huge rubble patch where this wall was.
Oh, whoops.
And they just, it's probably just gruesome and brutal fighting, where they're crawling on gravel, and it's just awful. Saladin says, that was awesome! And leads a 20,000 man charge in, or not a 20,000 man charge, it's much bigger than that, because he comes in, crushes Crusader resistance aside, gets to the gates, and floods the city with his men.
No, just through
He
that hole there?
completely replaces the garrison because they're so tired and sick and beat up, and they've been doing this for like a year now, or longer. It's almost 2 years now. So he winds up putting in a garrison of almost 20,000 men. And then takes all the sick people home and still has guys left over to fight.
Okay.
It's awesome.
Where were all those people hanging out before that? Just like...
Well, he had his army.
Yeah.
He had this big army, but every time he tried to attack, the Crusaders drove him back.
Yeah.
So finally he sees they rushed through this hole and they got beat up, so he sees like a weak spot.
Yeah.
Goes in, gets to the gates, floods some guys in, finally gets a reprieve, and then withdraws the sick and the injured to go take care of them because he cared about his people. More fighting occurs. Then in April of 20th, King Philip arrives.
Hey.
And now he's the boss because he's the highest ranking guy in the area.
Okay.
And he says, we're going to build some siege weapons and we're just going to pound this city to dust. Things are going well.
That'll teach him.
Yep.
To have
He's
a nice
expecting his neighbor, Richard, to arrive very soon.
Right,
But
he was
Richard
right by
decides
us.
to stop in Cyprus on the way.
Yeah, it is
He's
nice.
got 8,000
It's
men
nice.
with him.
Yeah.
And he decides, while I'm here, why not conquer it?
Sure.
And he does.
Oh, okay.
He conquers Cyprus. He marries the lady of Cyprus. I think her name was Joanna. And then he shows up with his army. He's like, so I'm a king of 2 places now. And I'm in charge.
Ooh.
Now, he's the scariest fighter there, so nobody really argues with him. Originally, like, Philip's like, no, I'm in charge. He's like, no, I don't care what you say. So this is when they start to make, like, the myth of Philip is obsequious and a sycophant of Richard's and all of this other. He's sickly, he's weak, he's a coward, he's this, that, and the other thing. Because Richard basically came in and says, I'm the boss. Both of them end up getting sick because there's like typhoid just going around. And Richard said, well,
it's going around.
we're going to hold off on the assault until I feel better. Which they do.
Okay.
But it's June Now it's 1191, and Richard leads a massive push to retake the city. After he gets better. July 3rd, they crash a hole through the wall, and the garrison says, "We would really like to surrender now.
Yes.
We've been doing this for 2 years.
We're tired of fixing this hole in the wall."
Yep. We're really sick of this because he takes down like one of the major bastions.
Yeah.
There's a story where he was like paying guys gold for each stone they took out of the wall.
Wow.
And eventually the whole thing collapses. The Crusaders rush in. It's a massacre, but it doesn't fully take the city. So they say, okay, just stop. We're done.
Please.
Richard doesn't like their terms.
Oh.
So he refuses.
Okay.
On July 11th, Saladin leads another attack. And this time, though, it's Richard leading it, the defense. And it does not go at all well for Saladin.
Okay.
His army retreats. And they say, "We can't get through their lines. You guys need to surrender." So they do. Richard takes their surrender July 11th. The terms of the surrender that he negotiates with Saladin are 100,000 pieces of gold and 1,600 Christian prisoners.
Oh.
And he'll let them have the city back.
Okay.
That's what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
Saladin says, fine. It's going to take some time to get that much coin.
Sure.
They argue a couple of times. They equivocate. They change some things.
Yeah.
August 11th rolls around. Richard's not getting what he wants.
Yeah.
He decides to change his plans.
The plans have changed.
He says, "You're not doing what I want you to do.
Yeah, where's my money?
Hurry up."
Yeah.
And that was like the original deadline. It was August 11th. August 20th happens. Richard leads 2,700 prisoners out of Acre to the city of, oh my God, I'm gonna ruin this. Ayadie. It's Ayadieh. So I think it's Ayadie or Ayadie.
Okay.
It's hard to pronounce.
Two Y's in a row, sure.
The Aya, I think that's it, but it's the
Aya.
Dieh.
Okay.
Ayadja. I think that might be a ja. Anyway, he leads them out onto this hill in front of Saladin's army, with his army between the hill and Saladin's army, and he proceeds to have every single person's throat cut and their heads cut off. The bodies are ripped open in search of gems and jewels that they might have swallowed, and he does this all in front of the army. Saladin loses his mind.
Yeah, I would too.
In anger and grief. This is a huge breach of protocol. The first thing he does is says, "Kill the Christians that we've got," because that's messed up. And then he tries to lead a rescue operation at the same time, where he sends his army to try to take them. The Christians stop him. They can't stop the slaughter, so he has to watch. And this was in front of like his tent. Like his tent was within view of this.
Yeah.
He has to watch almost 3,000 of his valiant defenders that he's trying to save get slaughtered. They're all killed. Richard retreats back into the city in good order and basically gives Saladin the bird.
I don't like this Richard fella.
No. And part of this is Richard's by himself now. He has, immediately after the city fell, he and Philip got arguing. Leopold got sick of it and went home.
Good Leopold.
Philip eventually says, "This is dumb. I've got stuff to do back in France. I'm going to go."
Yep.
So that's why Richard feels like the fire under him, because he's like, if I'm gone, but Philip's back home, Philip could attack England.
Yeah.
And my land in France, which is what I really care about. This is crap. I need to get this done.
Let's do something.
Let's do something really.
Let's do some war crimes.
Really, just
Sure.
devoid of any soul. We're just gonna commit an atrocity.
Yeah.
And get this over with quick. Well, it just makes Saladin furious.
Yeah.
Understandably, this is not an irrational response. And then he says, "Well, we're killing their prisoners. Eye for an eye."
Yeah.
He's old school, but also he can't have 1,600 prisoners while he's trying to lead a massive attack
Sure.
at his back, because then they might bust out and start killing his guys, and he could turn it into a rout.
Okay.
2 days later, Richard leaves the city, basically steals every bit of food and treasure he can out of the city, and marches south because he's like, "I'm done here. I did everything I wanted to do.
What a jerk.
I
didn't even
killed
want the city
everybody.
anyway."
I don't even want it." And he marches towards the port city of Jaffa. Saladin tries to stop him on the way. The Battle of Arsuf takes place September 7th, so just like 2 weeks later. And it's a very impressive show of Richard's army's discipline, because they literally are getting shot at with arrows all day. Some of the Crusaders looked like porcupines by the time they were done because they had arrows just sticking out of their armor. Most of the guys are just wearing like felt armor.
Yeah.
But the range isn't good for penetrating that even. So they're just walking around holding up their shields and they march miles like this. And finally, like when Saladin gets close enough, the cavalry gets unleashed and they scatter it, and it's a victory for Richard. And he goes down as one of the greatest military commanders ever because he took Acre, he conquered Cyprus on the way, he did all this, and then his army just crushed Saladin. But he's a monster who committed a massive war crime.
Yeah.
He goes on to take Jaffa. His inroads get right up to the gates of Jerusalem, but he doesn't have any more support. He knows he needs to get home because Philip's back there, and Philip hates him. And Philip and Leopold actually are like on the same page now. Leopold doesn't like Richard. Nobody likes Richard. He's a jerk.
He's a jerk.
Saladin doesn't like Richard because he's a monster war criminal.
Yeah.
But he can't stop him. So finally they come to terms, and Richard eventually goes home.
Fine.
Finally.
Go
So
for it.
Saladin's like, oh, thank God. I hate this guy. He's a monster. And that's the Siege of Acre.
Oh.
That's the most important part of that is
really depressing.
it's really awful. Like, Richard is regarded as like this great warrior king.
How does Richard die?
Oh, you want to know?
Is that a long story?
We can do that one quick. I
Just wanna know how he-
was going to do a whole thing about Richard someday, but I'm going to let you know. So Richard goes back home.
Yeah.
He gets captured in Austria,
Right. Good.
which is Leopold's land.
Yeah, get
Leopold
on, Leopold.
captures him
Yeah,
and
whatever.
stuffs him in a tower for like 2 years
Okay.
and bounces him around because he's like, forget this guy. Leopold's friends with Philip.
Okay.
And John, King John now, Prince John of England, his brother,
Yeah.
hates Richard. Now the whole Robin Hood story, that's when that's happening.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, we got to pay for Richard's ransom.
Yeah.
Well, they don't.
No.
They just collect all the money.
I don't like Richard either.
And then eventually they do pay the ransom, and it's a ludicrous amount. But then, like, Leopold doesn't let him go, but he escapes. And John gets like a letter saying like the wolf is loose, and John starts to freak out because Richard comes home. He's like, "Hey, little bro."
Hey, we were just ransoming you back.
Yeah, and he's like, "I was totally taking care of it." I feel like he just slaps him, and then he reclaims his crown. He immediately goes into France, gets more money together, gets more troops, and just starts taking castle after castle after castle from France. At some little stupid castle that doesn't matter. It's like the last place he wants to take. I think it's in like Chalon in France. It's just a little tiny place.
Yeah.
He's leading his men. It's a really one-sided fight.
Yeah.
On top of the castle is a kid
Good.
with a pot in one hand
Yeah.
and a crossbow in the other. And he's literally using the pot as a shield. Pot shot at some random night, happens to be the king. He takes the crossbow bolt to the throat.
Good.
For 3 days, this guy toughs it out.
Ooh, good.
And he says, you know what? Fair's fair. That was a good shot.
Good.
His men are furious.
Yeah,
Some
whatever.
of these guys were crusaders with him.
Sure.
And they say, yeah. We'll respect your wishes. Richard dies in agony from
Good.
sepsis. Not from the shot to the throat, but
Right.
from the infection he gets. So if there had been like modern medicine, this monster could have lived.
Sure.
He's 42 when that happens. But then here's the mother of it. Like he says, reward the kid, because that was fair. He took down a king. And he took down the baddest mofo
Yeah,
ever.
Yeah.
The second this town surrenders, he has this mercenary working for him. His name's Mercadier, which I think just means mercenary. Like, that's just his name.
Okay.
He takes the kid and flays him alive in front of everybody. Just strips the skin off his body.
Who does?
Mercadier kills the
Mercadier does?
kid that
After
Richard
the-
wanted him to live.
But the king was
The
was
king's dead,
No.
and then Mercadier flays the kid in front of everybody. He's like, that's what you get for killing my king. So that doesn't even have a happy ending.
Ugh.
But then Richard's dead, and then John takes over, and then England kind of just stops having land in France after that because John sucks as a king. And then that eventually leads to the 100 Years' War.
All right.
Richard's a monster.
That's all right.
Sorry.
Well, that's the end of
ending's
the
not even- I probably
Siege
could have
of
left
Acre.
out. I could have left out the flaying, but
We learned a lot, and it went a little over time because I wanted
you wanted to
I
know.
wanted some closure on
Indeed.
this Richard fella.
You only kind of got a little.
I don't care for him.
I don't either.
all right,
When I was
as-
a kid, I was taught he's a hero.
As usual, like and subscribe.
Yep.
Help us out in the description there with our Patreon.
Yep.
If you want, we'll be doing this every week. Next
Yep.
week, we're going to be discussing the Battle of Bosworth Field.
Yup. That's in England.
In 1485. We'll find out.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Also in the comments, if corrections or ideas for future episodes, feel free.
Any kind of like pronunciation explanations is super helpful. We really like that. Helps me a ton. I don't like to get that wrong.
We're only barely experts.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us in the tuning time.
Thanks for tuning in and joining us.
The show.
Yes. Share it with all your friends. Let us know if we did okay.
We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.